Where's the drug going?
Hello everyone, this is JPL, and today I'm joined with...
Matthew here.
And we are podcast name in brackets. Today we'll be talking about a movie which came out recently for us, and that is The Batman. So, Matthew, what did you think of The Batman?
To kind of give the overview, so The Batman is this now the ninth or 10th theatrically released
live action, you mean?
Batman movie. Directed by Matt Reeves, the first live action Batman movie in a decade.
A solo Batman, that is.
Yeah. If we don't count Batman versus Superman, which
I would, but yeah, just a solo Batman story. It's been a long time since we had live action.
Yeah, directed by Matt Reeves.
Known for doing the Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Yep, and Cloverfield. Starring Robert Pattinson, of all people.
Yeah.
As well as Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, Paul Dano as the Riddler, Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, and an unrecognizable Colin Farrell as the Penguin.
Yes.
You look at pictures side by side. Usually you look at the picture side by side with the makeup and then the person, and you can be like, oh yeah, I can kind of see the person's face in there. No, you can't with the Penguin. It's just completely unrecognizable.
Yeah, very good job. I'm still amazed what you can do with makeup.
Yeah,
with just a simple makeup job like that, and it looked really good in theaters.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this movie. I was hoping to enjoy it. Leading up to it, I was like, oh yeah, sure, another Batman movie, cool. But getting into it, it's oh yeah, really neat, good. I think that this is one of the more comic accurate stories for Batman that we've had in a long time, where just everything feels like a Batman story. You have it focused on a mystery. You have a lot of Batman's internal monologue, and it's focused on Batman. Most of this film is Batman in costume, which is really surprising.
Yeah,
really nice.
There's a handful of scenes where he's not wearing the costume, which is odd. I think in the Dark Knight movies, he spends, especially the Dark Knight Rises, he spends less time in costume than as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
So very different approach. But yeah, from the moment you hear the narration, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm reading a really good Scott Snyder Batman comic. This doesn't feel... I mean, it's similar to the Christopher Nolan movies in some ways, and it maybe has a few stylistic things from the Tim Burton ones, particularly in the architecture. But yeah, it's much more in line with the comics and maybe some of the animated films than anything we've seen before.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, before we dive in, Robert Pattinson as the Batman, what was your reaction when you first heard he was going to be Batman?
I was very skeptical. I was like, what? This guy? Mr. Sparkly Face from Twilight? But sure. Then I have to remember, all right, the casting process, you gotta trust the process. They chose this guy for a reason. And so it's okay, I'll give him a chance. Everyone thought Affleck was gonna be the worst. And a lot of people really love him. I love him. I think he did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly has an interesting career. Started out as this very promising young British actor, then got cast in Twilight, and that kind of changed public perception of him.
He slowly built himself back up over the years.
Well, yeah, and since Twilight, this is his only big blockbuster since Twilight, I believe. Since Twilight, he's been working on smaller indie films with sort of more niche directors.
Right.
I think his big break recently was when he was in The Good Time, the 2017 Safdie brothers movie. I'm reading interviews with Matt Reeves. He actually wrote the script with Pattinson in mind, having seen The Good Time recently. So,
Yeah. He was also in Tenet
yep.
for
Oh
which is
yeah,
like
yeah,
the main one that I've seen of him recently, which made me think, oh yeah, he could probably do something like this. Um, so for this film, I think Batman is his best performance. His Bruce Wayne, it's because the way his character's portrayed that I'm not so iffy about. But I think the way he portrayed it, sure, well done.
yeah,
Not the most accurate that I've seen, but well done.
yeah. It's interesting because there isn't much distinction between his Batman and Bruce Wayne, and
No.
I think that's a story choice more than a performance choice.
Yeah, I can't blame him for that.
It is a very odd direction to take this character who's kind of been known as a playboy philanthropist and then turn him into a recluse.
Yeah,
But it feels
because the Playboy was like very important to his persona of like trying to have a dual life,
yeah,
um, and whatnot. Anyway, this uh this movie is heavily inspired by films like stories like Year One, and of course The Long Halloween. More specifically, The Long Halloween, which I'm glad that we had that animated two-part come out this last year, because like there was a lot in this film that's taken straight out of that story, which I
yeah,
was surprised about,
yeah. It was
and
interesting.
it was really cool.
I've been reading the Long Halloween comic, and I watched the first of the two animated films based on it, and I wonder how much sort of how much connection the animated part of DC and the live action part have, because I wouldn't be surprised if DC kind of fast tracked the long Halloween movie to get people ready for this new one.
I doubt it because DC's not that clever.
Yeah. But it is kind of cool that the timing lined
It
up.
is really cool. I really appreciated it. The timing was nice for me.
Yeah.
Also Hush is another one,
Yeah.
but not as much.
Yeah, and
Not as much.
I think there's some elements of some of the Scott Snyder run. I don't know anything specific. I didn't find any connections, and I haven't read many Batman comics. But especially tonally, and then starting out with narration, that's something Scott Snyder does in a lot of his Batman stories. So yeah, it's drawing from a lot of things, and then it's also drawing from film history. There's a lot of similarities to the iconic 90s serial killer movies, specifically David Fincher's Seven.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
it's interesting that
So it's also a nice thing to say that this isn't a superhero movie, um, but more of like a detective noir, psychological thriller, whatnot, with superhero elements in it, but that's not the main focus, as in more recent years. So it was really nice and refreshing to have a different take, which really worked well for this story.
yeah, and I think unlike the Christopher Nolan movies, like I could see this Batman interacting with like say Poison Ivy, but at the same time this is a more even more grounded than Nolan's take, and even less of a more of a detective story than a superhero story.
Right. Nolan's trilogy was more of like a more realistic superhero story, where this was more realistic detective story,
Yeah,
serial killer. Which was it's really nice to have two different things and not the exact same thing over and over again.
yeah, and it's very grounded. But at the same time, I mean, like I said, I could imagine, the Batman 2 bringing in like a Poison Ivy or a Mr. Freeze, just because the world, even though it's grounded, it's also like the style is so heightened that I think you could have like the occasional element without completely breaking
Yeah,
it. Whereas the
like
Nolan films, if you had tried to put Poison Ivy in that, it would make no sense. Because those
no,
are like those are very tied. Like the style is, it's filmed very grounded and realistically. Whereas this one has more of a cinematic flair to it.
right. With that, where do you think we should start off here?
Well, we can start off at the beginning. So, just a summary in case anyone is coming into this podcast blind, although I would assume most people who are listening know it. This takes place. This is Batman. He's been fighting crime for a year,
Two.
or yeah, 2 years. This is year two. And on Halloween night, a murder happens, and a mysterious figure who is the Riddler, but we don't know who exactly he is or what exactly he's doing. And he has addressed a letter to the Batman, and so Batman now must try and solve who is the Riddler and what is the Riddler's plan. And in the process, he's kind of unraveling this dark web of secrets that encompasses the entirety of Gotham and its police force and politicians. So yeah, it's very much drawing from previous Batman stories, but it is putting it all together in a way that feels new and feels fresh.
Yeah, along the way, he's teaming up with Gordon and Catwoman to figure out more things. The story goes around these different paths. We have personal, emotional, connected stories with multiple characters. And then it leads up to the ultimate final stage where the plan is revealed, things happen, and we have the Batman.
Yeah, it is interesting. So this is a 3 hour long movie,
Yeah,
but I feel like there are multiple different plot threads that get followed throughout it, and you could almost like have a movie where it's just Batman and Selina Kyle and nothing with the Riddler. And that could almost stand on its own as its own movie, or you could have the Batman and Riddler movie with no Catwoman in it. But the plot lines are constantly weaving in and out, so it ends up making sense that they're all tied together. But there is a solid like 30 minutes where the Riddler doesn't play much of a role in the movie,
yeah.
or maybe even more than 30 minutes.
And we're kind of like, oh, what's he doing? We don't know.
Yep.
Catwoman. Should we start talking about characters?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was going to suggest we start with the opening,
Oh,
because
I
it's one of
love
the
this opening.
yeah,
It's a really good
it,
opening.
it's yeah, it's so it starts with this scene, and it's kind of been spoiled by the trailers, but it works very well in the movie, where it's just, well, okay, for very first scene, sorry, there's like multiple scenes at the beginning that are
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
The very first scene, it starts out and it's like this sniper scope looking at this house, and it looks kind of like you would imagine Wayne Manor to look. Um, and you see a kid who's like dressed up in a Halloween costume, and you go, "Oh, is that Bruce Wayne?" And then you see a mom and a dad, and you're like, "Oh, is this supposed to be the Waynes?" But no, it isn't. But this is one of the rare Batman movies that doesn't include the death of the Waynes as like a scene. But it makes you think it's going there, and then no, this is actually Gotham's mayor who is about to get murdered, and it's the Riddler looking at them through this sniper rifle. He then enters the house and murders the mayor in a very brutal scene, kind of the warning for any parents who took their small kids to the theater to maybe this isn't the movie for them.
Right, yeah.
Um, and then we move into the other opening scene, which I really like, which is our introduction to Batman. It's Halloween. There's a lot of crime going on, but as he points out in his narration, the bat signal has now become the sign of fear for criminals. So we get three separate incidents being intercut. There's a robbery of a convenience store. There's some people spray painting a bank, and there's some people on a train who are going to mug a man. And in each of those scenes, the bat signal goes on, the criminal sees it, and then they look in the shadows to try and see if Batman's coming for them. And obviously these scenes are happening at the same time, so Batman can't be at all three. But it's just so cool to see, like, it feels ripped from the comics.
Yeah. You see the psychological fear that Batman wants to have the criminals to have. Like,
Yeah.
Fear is my weapon. Like,
And
I am
it's,
in every shadow. You don't know when I'm coming out.
yeah. And it's just like there are enough shots, and what the 3-hour runtime lets them do is you can have a, 3-second shot of just the shadows, and while you're looking at it, you're wondering, is the Batman gonna step out? And then he doesn't, and it cuts away, but the criminal, has run away because they aren't gonna risk it. And it builds up the tension up until you get the final reveal of him stepping out in his costume, and you hear the footsteps.
It's not even just that. The footsteps, you hear the first, and it's like Batman can be sneaky, but he's doing the footsteps to freak him out, which is really cool. Like, he comes out really slowly.
Yeah.
So
and they did something similar in The Dark Knight, but it's not. This one just
not to this degree.
Nails. Yeah, this one nails the execution and makes it very obvious. Like, this Batman is. No, I mean, he is a person, but he's also a mythological figure within Gotham that has taken on this role of, like, every shadow could be him, so every criminal is scared. And this is where we first get the line, never in this movie does Batman say, "I'm Batman." He calls himself Vengeance, which becomes a very important theme throughout the movie. And that's kind of the development of the film is entirely based around this line that's in the first introduction to him. I'm
sure he does call himself Batman at some point.
Well, yeah. In this first
in the conversation with Alfred, he talks about it, but he never calls himself the Batman to people.
He does. When someone asks who he is, he says, "I'm Vengeance, not I'm Batman." Which is because everyone knows the iconic "I'm Batman" line.
I'm Batman.
So to switch it up and, like, okay, this is a different Batman than we've seen before, and maybe one who
going back to the classic Batman, like, I am Vengeance, I am the Knight, I am the Batman.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So it's really cool to see that. Also, just Catwoman just calls him Vengeance all the time.
Yeah, both Catwoman and the Penguin call him. The Penguin specifically calls him Mr. Vengeance in one scene. That's how he introduces Batman to Catwoman. And then Catwoman kind of does it in a playful way. But yeah, it's interesting because I mean, what people are called in superhero movies is always kind of an interesting thing. Where, like, do you call them by their civilian name or by their superhero name? And different movies will do different things. I think specifically, James Gunn likes to refer to people by their civilian names, whereas I think a lot of actually no, Marvel in general refers to people, it's Tony Stark. People don't say, "Hey, Iron Man." It's like, "Hey, Tony."
Yeah.
So then to have this movie where he's Vengeance, he's not Batman. Most of the people call him Vengeance. Obviously, not everyone does, but
I'm sure, like, later in other films coming up, they will refer to him as Batman.
yeah,
Especially by the end, he's just become a much more iconic character for the world of Gotham.
yeah. And it does suggest, I think that's where this is one of the rare Batman live action movies where Batman has significant character development throughout it. Um, so it's interesting that because often he is sort of this cipher of a character, and then the story of the movie kind of happens around him. Whereas in this movie, it's very much about him and what he does.
Mm.
And it's as you said before, it's about Batman. It's not even about Bruce Wayne. So yeah, then after this whole sequence with the criminals, Batman is summoned to the scene of the mayor's murder. Where first off, seeing Batman in costume with all of these police officers, he just looks so out of place.
Yeah.
And they even point this out in the movie of like, is he supposed to be here? One of the officers says. Um, but he's doing actual detective work. He's like looking around the crime scene, interacting with things like
Yeah.
trying to.
I really loved that. I loved
Yeah,
all the subtle details that they gave him here of him looking at everything. He was just so observant. He's not talking about everything he sees. He's just the audience has to make these observations with him, which
yeah,
I thought was really cool. I really loved his contact lens that lets him record everything he sees, which is a really neat idea
yeah.
that we see in some things.
And it's one of the few instances of actual tech that Batman has that he doesn't have his batarangs. He doesn't have a glide suit, like he has a base jumping suit that he uses in one scene. But this is a very like grounded Batman. His technology is not. This isn't Ben Affleck's Batman had a bat plane and had like anything you could want, and even Christian Bale had a bunch of gadgets and gizmos. And but yeah, this Batman, it's like he has the contact lenses, he has the base jumping suit which he uses once, he has a cool Batmobile, though not a like tank
Right.
or anything. It's
He's got
very
like
obviously a
a
souped
knife
up
in his
car.
chest.
Yeah, but it's very like simple things. Like you could imagine someone actually having these things in real life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's interesting, and it's such a neat little. The contact lenses become an important mechanic for the plot. So, but yeah, he investigates the crime scene. Then he is commissioner, who is not Commissioner Gordon, which is an immediate sign that the commissioner is about to die because we need to eventually get Commissioner Gordon. Um, but the commissioner comes in and says, "Batman, you can't be in here." So Batman leaves, but as he's walking out, we get a look at the mayor's son, and there's a moment of connection between Batman and him, or maybe more accurately, it's a one-sided connection where Batman goes, "Hey, this is a kid just like me," and the kid's like, "Why is Batman here?" But
Yeah.
it's an important thing, and it's something that I really like, where we keep seeing this kid throughout the movie, and so their connection is important, but it's never spoken about.
No.
And the audience obviously knows, like, okay, yeah, they have this kid is in a similar situation to Bruce Wayne, but it's an interesting way to tell the Bruce Wayne story without having to show the murder and the crime alley and growing up. You kind of get it through a different character.
Yeah. Where should we go to next?
Well, yeah. Next, he leaves the crime scene and goes home to the Batcave, which is now a rundown train station underneath Wayne Tower, which is cool. It doesn't get much time on screen,
No.
but it's an interesting idea, and it makes. I mean, this is a Batman more directly tied to Gotham, the city. He doesn't live in Wayne Manor. He lives in this really weirdly designed apartment in Wayne Tower,
Yeah.
with the most Gothic architecture you could ever have. Most as in quantity. It is every window and every wall. It looks like he's shacking up in like the steeple of Notre Dame or something. And yeah, this is where we meet Alfred, Andy Serkis.
Who's not here a whole lot in this film.
He's kind of on the periphery of a lot of what happens. Definitely not as involved as Michael Caine was.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or
there's kind of,
even like Jeremy Irons.
yeah,
This one sits back a lot like the original ones, um, with even less story, I suppose.
yeah.
So I can't wait to see more in future movies with his actor,
Yeah,
because I really like this actor.
yeah. Andy Serkis is great. And he's I think he's doing a good job in the role. Again, he doesn't have many scenes to show off his acting skills.
Mm.
He was one of those casting announcements where, because he's not necessarily who you would first think of for Alfred, but he makes sense with the interpretation they're going for, which is
And also with Matt Reeves, it makes sense to have
yeah,
this actor, of course.
yeah. Yeah, you do want to. Matt Reeves, of course, worked with him on the Planet of the Apes movies, and he's an actor who very rarely gets to be just a normal human guy in these big blockbusters. So
Yeah.
he's usually, he's been in a lot of huge franchises, but always under tons of CGI. So yeah, it's cool to see him get a role where he can be himself and doesn't have to get a bunch of dots painted on his face.
Be in a mocap suit and crawl around
Yep.
on all fours like a monkey.
Yep.
So
Which he's great at the mocap stuff, but it's
he
fun to
is.
see.
It's fun to see the real him.
Yeah. And even his like visually he looks I think they're going with the Batman year 2 run where Alfred was sort of ex-military,
Mm-hmm.
more of a sort of former. I guess Michael Caine was also ex-military, but he was a bit more posh and a bit. This Alfred feels a bit more combat ready,
Yeah.
which I would be interested to see if that factors into the next movie. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Like Secret Agent Alfred is always fun to see. I
yeah,
believe you can see some of that in the Pennyworth show,
yeah,
which I've not seen, but like, Alfred.
yeah.
It's Alfred. So.
He has to be in the Batman movies. But one of those characters that's just kind of always there.
Yeah. Um, I wouldn't say he's the perfect Alfred, but he does a good job.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we don't really have that many scenes with him. He doesn't come across as like a posh butler.
It's been really a long time since I've seen like an Alfred that.
Michael Caine kind of feels like a
Yeah, but I
okay.
also like there's also like
Yeah,
a look with Alfred
yeah,
that none of the live action ones have really achieved.
yeah. But I could see like Michael Caine. I could see answering the door,
Correct.
whereas Andy Serkis, I guess he could answer the door. It
He
just seems
looked to be like more so
was
running the
yeah,
business than he was actually a butler. But
yeah. And this Batman actually, we he has a maid who has several lines of dialogue. Um, and is not just an extra, although she doesn't have a big role in the movie. But it seems like she's doing a lot of the butler type work.
yeah, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah, again, she doesn't factor in much. This is a 3 hour movie and she has two lines of dialogue, three.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
So at some point we go and we meet the Penguin.
yep. He's in the Iceberg Lounge.
Yes, of course.
I am a little bit disappointed that this Iceberg Lounge is like a an area under the docks and not like a big luxurious iceberg floating out in the harbor. But it's in line with what the film is, like the style of the film.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll get his fancy lounge.
Uh,
But yeah, for now with this world, it's what we get with Colin Farrell, and like we said before, completely unrecognizable with his makeup.
yep. Also accent. He's an Irish actor, but you can't tell in this. You can kind of hear a bit of his voice peeking through, but I mean, it's such an odd performance, and it works so well. He's like the one bit of comedic relief that the movie has every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great scene where his hands and feet are handcuffed together, and he kind of waddles like a penguin as he's trying to walk. Um, but yeah, he doesn't carry around an umbrella, and he doesn't have an army of penguins set to explode.
Not yet.
Not yet, at least.
Maybe one day.
He doesn't run for mayor or bite off people's noses or eat raw fish. He's a more he's kind of like a mid-level criminal. He kind of runs the Iceberg Lounge. He deals drugs to the people there. But he is still underneath Falcone, who is kind of the big crime head honcho in this one. Um, Played by I don't have the
Oh, Falcone, John
yeah,
Turturro.
John Turturro, who feels like very good casting for that
Yeah,
part.
that was surprising casting. Like
Yeah,
he's a perfect Falcone. Like he looked the role. He just did a good job.
yeah,
The only thing I know him from is from Transformers.
yeah. He's kind of he's been around the block a few times. He's in a few of the Coen brothers movies. Um, yeah, an interesting character. He's kind of one of the less theatrical Batman villains.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the more ones you see in comics
Yeah,
and TV shows. So, uh, good job. Like his story with Selena is straight from the comics,
yeah,
which I was really surprised that they took and did. So, really cool.
yeah. It's an interesting and a lot of his plot line feels separate from the whole Riddler and serial killer side.
Hmm.
But it's interesting. Yeah, the first half of this movie, or maybe the first hour of the movie, feels very much almost like a Saw movie with some of the Riddler traps. And then for the middle hour, it's more of like a mob movie where Batman is kind of following these threads of like, where's the corruption in Gotham? And then the last little bit goes back to more of the Riddler stuff. which it's interesting. I mean, it's a 3-hour movie, as we've said before, but I think it justifies all 3 hours. Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is where we meet Selena Kyle, Catwoman.
Another great casting.
Yes, perfect for the role.
Yeah, really perfect for the role. Like
Yeah,
straight out of the
yeah,
comics, perfect for the role.
yeah. Like Anne Hathaway, great actress. But I think she feels a little too middle class for the role. Whereas Zoe Kravitz is like, I mean, she's definitely like, yeah, I don't know how to put it. She feels more at home in like the where Anne Hathaway, she's got a very particular persona, like the Princess Diaries type thing,
Hmm.
which I think she's good in the role, but I don't buy that she lives in a dingy apartment at any point in that.
I don't look at her and think she's Catwoman.
Yeah,
Whereas here, I think she's Catwoman.
yeah. Zoe Kravitz feels like the comic character,
Hmm.
feels more in line with even like the Michelle Pfeiffer interpretation of the character.
That's
Kind
which
of,
is
yeah.
yeah. I mean, although that's not perfect, but
No, yeah.
it was a choice.
Yep. I think I would put Michelle Pfeiffer and Zoe Kravitz. They're doing different things, but they're on a very similar level in terms of how good they are in this role.
Yeah.
Which again, not to say that Anne Hathaway is terrible in the role. I just think she's kind of miscast.
Hmm.
But yeah, the casting director for this movie deserves some kind of recognition because they found the best cast they could for this movie.
Yeah, really good casting.
Yeah, I was also
Jeffrey Wright as Gordon.
oh yeah, and
Even though like it's not your classic Gordon, that's the only actor I feel is appropriate for this
yeah,
version. So
he's and Jeffrey Wright is kind of known for more soft-spoken roles, but then you have scenes where he kind of like goes all out and gets angry and does stuff, and he plays all of it so well.
hmm.
It's an interesting version of Gordon, and then also an interesting performance if you look at the rest of Jeffrey Wright's career.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I saw anything new in his performance here. There's a lot. It's a lot like his other characters that he does, but it's just a performance that just works well
Yeah,
in a lot of different characters. So
yeah.
it's
The
good.
scenes with him and Batman together, they just work so well. Pattinson
Yeah.
and Wright are like perfect together, and then Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz are great together.
Hmm.
They have a very sort of complicated chemistry throughout the movie, as it is in the comics. There's like this: are they gonna get together? Are they like? Is there a spark between them? Should there be a spark between them?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's and I don't know. I never got that from The Dark Knight Rises, whereas in this movie it feels
Feels closer. I
yeah,
don't think they've got there perfectly, but it's there.
yeah. I think a second film could explore that a bit more in depth and get some interesting drama from that.
Yeah.
And while we're also at the club, I wanted to briefly mention the twins. I don't know if they have a specific name in the film. Um, the throughout the movie there are like extras who kind of recur in different scenes, so you kind of get to
Yeah.
see their characters. And these two actors, they are twins in real life, Max Carver and Charlie Carver, and they're very physically imposing. But their entire role in the movie is to be beat up by Batman. So in this first scene is the first time they get beat up by Batman. And then later in the movie, they show up at a drug bust and get
Mhm.
beaten up by Batman again. And then at the end of the movie, they once again get beaten up by Batman. And each time he takes less time to beat them up. So it's an interesting way of showing like his development.
Yeah, and the twins, they are characters in the comics, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different interpretations of those characters, but they do exist in some form or another.
So yeah, this is the after the club, Batman follows Selina Kyle home and spies on her. She's living with a someone who works at the club, who's trying to get out and is kind of connected somehow to this whole Riddler thing, but we don't know exactly how. And her passport's been stolen, so Selina Kyle says, "Okay, I will go and get your passport back." And Batman watches as she changes into her Catwoman outfit. Um, it's kind of a weird scene, but it tells you that this Batman is not the Batman we've seen in other movies.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a weirdo.
And if you don't know anything about Catwoman, this is just like a weird, like, oh, what's this? This took a turn.
Yeah. But it is such an interesting, like, I believe it's one unbroken take between when she walks into the apartment, then when she gets into her Catwoman costume and then jumps off out of the fire.
I do think that they cut to see his reaction, but
okay, yeah. It feels like an unbroken take.
Yeah.
And then he follows her to the mayor's house where she opens a safe and finds the passport. And they have a brief interaction. This is kind of their first time interacting as Batman and Catwoman. They had talked at the club briefly, this is kind of the beginning of their alliance. They go back to Selina Kyle's apartment, and it's been completely destroyed. And then they split up for the night, but at the same time, unbeknownst to either of them, the commissioner is being murdered by the Riddler.
Yeah.
Which, it's again, we knew he wasn't long for this world. Commissioners who aren't Commissioner Gordon don't tend to stick around.
Yeah.
But it's a very, I think it might be the most disturbing part of the film. And you don't see any of the violence, but the Riddler has sort of put this weird contraption on the commissioner where it goes over his head, and then there are two rats in a cage that are going to be released to eat off the commissioner's face. And it's something you would expect to see at a Saw movie, not the Batman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you don't see the violence, but the implication is there.
Yeah. This is definitely pushing the edge of the PG-13 rating.
It is. It is. Let's push this along.
Yeah. So, Commissioner gets murdered, and Batman kind of investigates that. Then he goes back to the club. Turns out there's a club beneath the club, which Selina Kyle has access to. So he gives her his contact lens so she can stream video from inside, and the facial recognition software on his contact lens picks up a whole bunch of high-profile Gotham people in this club, including the DA, who becomes an important character for the next sort of 20 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out there's also a rat who helped take down Maroni, who's a rival crime lord in Gotham, to Falcone. And then we get to the funeral scene, which is really the first Bruce Wayne scene we've had in the movie.
Yeah.
He makes a rare public appearance at the funeral of the mayor, he's not there to pay his respects. He's there to see if the Riddler shows up, which he does, though we don't see him, just his silhouette.
In a really cool shot.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the point of the movie where they're pretty on the nose about the various the music has sort of major themes, character themes throughout. And this is the funeral scene is kind of where it becomes clear that okay, the Riddler's theme is this Ave Maria. That's what the choir at the funeral is singing, kind of foretelling what is about to happen. Which is a car crashes through the building, and out steps the DA, and he has a bomb attached to his neck, and is receiving a call on his phone addressed to Batman. So Bruce Wayne goes home, comes back later as Batman, and this is this kind of scene is kind of a staple of sort of the mystery serial killer type movie where you have to solve the riddles to get the bomb disarmed. I think there's an episode of Sherlock where they do this. But yeah, it's again a pretty disturbing scene.
We also find out that Batman's face is indestructible.
Yep. The bomb does go off, and
point blank on Batman.
Yep. And
and his face is totally unscarred.
He gets knocked out, and yep, no scars, no marks, nothing at all.
I believe the armor, but his face.
Yeah.
That's where the suspension kind of. But we'll let it slide.
Yeah, sure. there are occasional moments where it's like, okay, that doesn't seem very realistic, but it is like, if you can overlook it, it makes for I don't think
because he wakes up in the police department, surrounded by cops.
Yep, which is not good for him. Cops in this movie don't really like him, but it leads to he must now escape, but he and Gordon have a short conversation before then. And the escape from the police building is really cool. One of the few action scenes in this movie. There aren't a ton of action scenes. There are action moments, but this is one of the few specific set pieces.
Yeah.
Where you get Batman uses his grappling hook and goes up a flight of stairs as the cops are shooting at him. And this is where the only time he uses his glide ability, which is revealed to be a base jumping suit and a parachute, which he successfully escapes but flops the landing.
Yeah.
And we find out that not only is his face indestructible, but the rest of him is also indestructible because he walks away with nothing but a limp.
He's also a very skinny guy underneath that suit.
Yeah.
Suspension of disbelief. We can let it slide.
I think these are the things that people are going to point out as the movie kind of makes the rounds. But it doesn't really ruin the rest. You know, this is a 3-hour movie. A few silly things here or there don't really take you out of it too much.
No.
And it's interesting that this is the rare Batman who makes mistakes, who gets injured. Like, he makes even bigger mistakes later on where he completely misinterprets clues, and
that should have been solved 30 minutes earlier in the film. On wings.
Yep. There's a few, but it does make sense within the film why he makes those mistakes, I think.
Right, but like surely would have crossed his mind.
Yeah.
Rat with wings. Oh, a bat.
Yep.
Like it's so commonly used in other Batman medium that how it took him so long to figure it out. In fact, he doesn't. Penguin figures it out for him. And it's like, oh, thank you, Penguin. Took you long enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the clue that Batman spends the most time chasing,
Mm-hmm.
partially because he chases it the wrong direction. We get the really cool scene of the car chase with the Penguin.
Not my favorite car chase, but sure.
Okay. Now, I saw it in IMAX, so I may be biased towards it because the sound system in the IMAX theater, like anytime Batman revved his engine, it shook the
Yeah,
entire
and that's really
theater.
cool. Like the Batman, the mobile introduction is really cool. Um, the chase was a little bit hard to follow, which is why I don't love it the
It's
most.
a
But
it's a very like it's filmed very reserved.
yeah, which I feel like it could have given it a little bit more style with this one. But other
Yeah,
than that, it's fine.
I think it works and it builds towards the final shot of this chase sequence, which is the upside down Batman walking away from an explosion
Yeah, yeah.
slowly. Which is just it's such a cool scene, and that was for me. When I saw it the second time, I was kind of paying attention to audience reaction, and that was, I think, the moment where people switch from like enjoying the movie to loving the movie,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like that's the moment where you go, okay, Robert Pattinson like is Batman in this movie.
Yeah.
Like he's just walking away. You're like, okay, yeah, he's or walking towards the camera. It's a great shot. I can understand why they used it in all of the trailers.
Yeah, of course. It's a great shot. Why wouldn't you use it?
Yeah, and I haven't tried to see it what it would look like right side up, but the upside down perspective adds so much to it.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah,
Um, the movie goes on. Uh, we have some slight reveals.
yeah,
It turns out that the Riddler knows who Batman is,
yes,
which I knew this going into the movie. However, I never really felt that we understood how he knew.
yes, which becomes relevant later on. Um, but yeah, there's this implication that okay, maybe Riddler knows who Batman is. But then the Riddler is also it's revealed he is through these murders he is trying to unveil a web of corruption in Gotham that implicates everyone he's murdered so far. So the mayor, the commissioner, and the DA, as well as the Wayne family, and obviously Falcone is like the
Yeah,
crime element of this.
he's
And then
also a streamer.
yeah, he is a live streamer. He streams on Twitch. We don't know what games he plays when he streams, but
Yeah,
it is confirmed.
that's really the only thing that I feel could really date this movie. But the way it's done is so creepy. And
Yeah,
it's like, oh my gosh, this is really good. This
yeah.
would make for an interesting villain, and they did it.
It's something that wasn't revealed in any of the trailers, which is
No,
and it makes it might date the movie, but it also at the same time makes it feel relevant as we're watching it now.
yeah. Also, it's also like for some comedic value where he's like, "Thank you guys so much for like being part of this community." You know, he does all of that typical stuff, and it's like funny.
Yeah,
Also a little bit sad, but funny.
yeah. He stops short of saying, "Please like and subscribe.
Yeah,
Remember to turn on the notification bell. I'd like
yeah,
to thank our sponsors."
yeah,
And it's yeah, it's such a and it's spot on for the interpretation of the character of this. Like
yeah. It is
he's
so
kind of
spot
a
on.
he's a strange loner who's kind of looking for a purpose in life, and so he like finds this online community that then leads him to become a serial killer. Or
Fortune.
he yeah. Yeah, there are like, and I was listening to an interview with the with Matt Reeves, and this was written before a lot of the like QAnon conspiracy theory stuff, but it feels very relevant to that.
Mm.
Because I believe they even finished filming before a lot of that was prevalent. Obviously, they filmed this very very troubled filming. Not in terms of like anything that happened on set, but it was filmed. It was interrupted for COVID, and
Yeah.
at one point Robert Pattinson got COVID, so they had to stop filming again.
And then he
Very
wouldn't
often.
work out for the film.
Yep. Which I think it works fine.
Yeah.
He looks good as Batman. There's a scene where he does a shirtless conspiracy board, or he makes the conspiracy board shirtless, and yeah, he looks good in it. Underrated scene in the movie, in my opinion.
Right. Um, so we get through some more things. Batman finds out who the target is.
Yep.
And then through a series of events, we finally capture Riddler.
Yes. So it is. We find out that the rat that had sort of orchestrated this giant drug bust in the past was Falcone, and he had been working alongside all of these top people in Gotham to ensure that he would stay afloat while sinking this other drug lord. And Batman arrests him. They bring him out, and he gets shot. Falcone gets shot. And they are able to trace the shot back to the Riddler's apartment, which is right across the street from the Iceberg Lounge, which explains how the Riddler kind of knew who was involved in this corruption scandal. And yeah, they track him to a diner where he has ordered a slice of pumpkin pie.
Mm-hmm.
Poor guy doesn't even get to finish it.
Yeah. Too busy drawing that riddle,
Yep.
question mark,
Yep.
on his little coffee.
Yeah.
He gets arrested. We have a scene with him and Batman in prison,
Yeah.
in the asylum.
This is like, so when they announced Paul Dano for the Riddler, like for this interpretation of the Riddler, he's kind of an obvious choice of like the creepy serial killer. He's kind of played roles like that in the past.
He looks like
But
he can fit the role,
yeah,
of course.
yeah. But then you watch the scene and you're like, okay, yeah, that's why you get Paul Dano to do this, because
Mm-hmm.
he could do creepy and psychotic like no one else, and in an unsettling way. Because usually, like Heath Ledger, when he did creepy and unsettling, it was kind of fun. Like there was an element of like fun to it. Whereas
Yeah,
Paul
because he's the
Dano,
Joker, of course.
yeah.
This one was more.
But this is straight up like serial killer. He's just so unsettling, and yeah, the scene is, you want to like leave the theater for a second and like take a shower.
But a good performance.
Yeah. And this is where we get maybe one of the biggest reveals of the movie.
No, not yet. That comes later.
Oh, no, this is the scene between Batman and Riddler,
Okay.
where it is revealed that the Riddler doesn't actually know who Batman is. He very creepily says Bruce Wayne's name a few times, and then informs Batman, like, too bad we didn't get him. Which this entire time, Robert Pattinson, or like Bruce Wayne, is like looking around, like, there's a security camera there. Are you going to reveal my identity?
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I must have misunderstood the context, because I
yeah.
thought that he was like confirming that he knew.
No, yeah, that's it, it is a little ambiguous because he says Bruce Wayne very creepily.
Okay.
but what he's revealing is that he doesn't know who Batman is. Like, because leading up to this, all of the hints have been pointing to, okay, Riddler kind of knows Batman is Bruce Wayne. But then when we get to the scene, it's revealed that no, he actually doesn't. And he actually thinks he's working with Batman. He thinks he and Batman are on the same team in revealing this web of corruption and murdering all of these people in Gotham. And Batman kind of, at the beginning of the scene, he's, terrified that, like, oh no, is the Riddler going to reveal who I am? But as soon as he realizes that Riddler doesn't actually know he is Bruce Wayne, he's just like, no, we are nothing alike. You're crazy. We were never working together. And that kind of shatters the Riddler's point of view in the story.
And we also find out that Batman actually didn't solve Riddler's full mission.
Yeah.
There was something missing.
Yep. And so Batman returns to the apartment, the Riddler's apartment. And this was the scene where I realized Batman doesn't have many lines in this movie. Because this entire scene, he has no lines of dialogue, and he's interacting with a cop completely wordlessly. Usually Batman has more lines than this, and like maybe even some quippy one-liners, but this interpretation of Batman is almost always silent or says very few words.
Mm-hmm. As he should.
Yeah. It's a really interesting scene between him and this cop where he is able to get a bunch of information out of this
and
cop.
It's also like a arc for this cop, because this cop was like against him in the beginning, and slowly here helps Batman discover the secret.
Yeah, which is that the Riddler has painted a map of Gotham underneath his carpet, and with blinking lights, which represent the vans that are set to blow up and destroy Gotham's seawall, flooding the city.
It seemed like a kind of a strange thing where it's like, was everything pointing to that? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's strange. But there's also like something that leads to something. It's like, okay, we're gonna kill the mayor, the new mayor. Which, has been teased the entire film.
Yeah.
Because the face of this new mayor is throughout the entire film in posters and interviews on screens that, like, obviously something's going to go on. At one point, I thought maybe she hired the Riddler. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
and it is like, yeah, she's an important background character in it, where it isn't really until the end of the movie that she gets any real scenes. She has like a brief interaction with Bruce Wayne at the funeral. But this is kind of the Riddler's entire ideology, is that Gotham is so corrupt that even this new mayoral candidate who is promising real change won't be able to achieve it. So he's gonna have her murdered, and flood the entire city and kind of wipe Gotham off the map. And when they first revealed the plan, I was like, there's no way they're doing this. Like, you can't just flood Gotham. And then 2 minutes later, Gotham is starting to flood, and you go, okay, yeah, they are actually doing this.
So how are we going to get back from this, huh?
Yeah. And it is, the comics have the Scott Snyder run Year Zero. Gotham gets flooded, and it kind of, it's similar to the Dark Knight Returns storyline, where Gotham kind of becomes this lawless place.
It's also like setting up a Batman No Man's Land kind of story.
Yeah.
Where, like Dark Knight Rises, like the city is officially declared martial law. The states is like, nope, screw them. They're on their own. The city's closed off. Figure yourselves out, which is hopefully should be cool to see in the next movie if they do go that route.
Yeah, and it's such a wild swing for this first Batman movie and what is likely to be a new series of Batman films. Like, I could see if they did that in the second or third movie, but to start out with it's just an interesting new direction to take it. And especially since, because we've seen a lot of Batman stories on screen already, but we
Even
haven't seen,
animated as well.
yeah. This is kind of like indicating there's a new direction that they're planning on going in. But yeah, then we get sort of the whole climax of the film is centered around this. The city's flooding, and there's a plot to assassinate the mayor-elect.
Batman has to stop the
Yep,
killers.
yep. And it's this is maybe the scene of the movie that's sort of most uncomfortably reflective of modern day, where we get a what's essentially a mass shooting scene, which Batman must stop, and it isn't done in a sensationalist way, but it is kind of when they went that direction, I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of an odd choice, but it makes sense for what the film has been building towards.
Yeah.
Where it's all of these people who are dressed up like the Riddler dresses in this movie, and as the stadium is flooding, they're kind of trying to assassinate the mayor, and Batman must swing around the rafters and try to stop them.
He gets shot a few times.
Yeah, quite
And
a
has
few
to be
times.
saved by Catwoman
Yeah,
because he forgets to move as
yeah,
he's there for 20 seconds with a gun to his face.
yeah. Which he's hanging off the side of a catwalk, so it
I
makes sense
get it.
as to
I
why he
get it.
can't.
He's
And
yeah,
he's just been shot in the chest with a shotgun.
several times.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, Catwoman saves him, which is kind of her big character change moment, and it isn't a huge character change, but she spends a lot of the middle part of the film wanting to find whoever kidnapped and later it is revealed murdered her roommate, and kill him, which is then revealed to be Falcone, who is also her father.
Okay. Well.
Um, which is a plot line we've kind of skipped over,
Yeah.
but
I.
in
Okay.
in the interest of time, we can circle back to it.
Straight from the comics.
Yeah,
And that's it. Let's continue.
yeah, but yeah, she saves Batman in this kind of like act of heroism, and then she gets attacked by one of these Riddler goons, and Batman, who has been shot in the chest again multiple times with a shotgun, injects himself with some adrenaline and then beats this guy up very brutally.
Which was very interesting to see.
Yeah,
Which I've not seen that done in any other version of Batman
yeah.
I've seen. Which
He
is.
very much loses control.
Mhm.
And then that's kind of the moment where he realizes that, like, okay, maybe he isn't approaching this in the right way. Which is then they pull the mask off of this guy and the cops are up in this catwalk and they go, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm vengeance." Um, which then kind of prompts this thing in Batman where there is this similarity between Batman and the Riddler and Catwoman and these Riddler goons, where they've all kind of been taking the same approach to, we need to stop crime by fighting crime. Um, and so Batman is on like one end of it where he's like, we need to stop crime by fighting crime, but we can't kill anyone. And then Catwoman is like, we need to stop crime, but we can kill like maybe Falcone. And then the Riddler is like, we will stop crime by killing everyone. Um, and Batman has this realization of, okay, maybe Gotham doesn't need people to fight crime. Maybe Gotham needs people to help build up the city and save lives. So he sees there's an electrical sign which has fallen down and is now swinging over this stadium. There's people in the water. It's gonna kill people, so he jumps over to it, cuts it off so it won't kill anyone, and then lights a flare and leads the survivors out of the stadium.
Really cool
Yeah,
shot.
yeah.
Beautiful.
And
Red has been like something very specific with Batman in this film, and here we finally see that full shine of red.
yeah. And then we get the closing narration, which is sort of Batman musing on.
Which we in the film, so we have a live action Batman.
Yeah.
We don't see a lot of Batman leading people out.
Yeah.
Or in the daytime helping out
Yeah.
people. Which we haven't seen since the 60s Batman.
Yeah.
So like I was super cool and happy to see this new take on Batman, and it's like, oh man, this is cool. He's now this symbol.
Yeah. He's a symbol of hope, not of fear. Although maybe still a symbol of fear to certain people, but it's a big shift from even how he's portrayed in like the Dark Knight trilogy, where he now there's this challenge that the film ends with where okay, he now has to like work on rebuilding Gotham rather than just running around punching people. And it is tied directly to the plot of the film because as it's revealed, this whole corruption scandal is happening through a fund started by Thomas Wayne that if there had been oversight of it, if Bruce Wayne had been sort of in his role as the leader of this company, he might have been able to stop this entire corruption scandal from even happening. But he was busy punching criminals in the face, and so he completely missed that there was this huge corruption network happening right under his nose. And it harkens back to earlier in the film where the mayoral-elect Bella Real sort of tells Bruce Wayne, hey, you should be doing more from the city. From what I can see, you aren't doing anything. And at the time you think, well, yeah, he's doing a bunch. He's the Batman. But with the end of this film, it recontextualizes it and it says, well, yeah, maybe she has a point. Maybe he does need to do a bit more and take a different approach.
And then we finally end off the movie with a separation between Selina and Batman.
Yep. Well, first, before that, we get the big scene. Really,
Yes, that's
the only scene in this movie that is hinting at future movies, and
well,
yeah,
Reeves says like, oh, like we may not use that character in later movies, but he's there.
Yeah, it feels like the type of scene which would be an after credit scene in most other superhero movies. In fact, I think we've seen this exact style of scene in several superhero movies where it's the villain of the movie is in prison and then who's in the next cell? This other character you know. It was definitely in Shazam, and it was in the Venom.
It was also in Gotham too with the same character.
Yeah.
Oh, almost the exact same characters, pretty much.
Yeah. So it's kind of this like overplayed thing. Honestly, it might be my least favorite part of the movie, even though I'm very curious to see this casting. So it's Riddler is in jail, sad, or in Arkham Asylum, sad that his plan has failed. And then who's in the next cell over? It is a mysterious inmate who refers to himself as a clown.
Yeah.
His face is like twisted into a smile. Who could that be? We'll never find out.
Well, there is a deleted scene.
Yeah.
Where he and Batman are discussing this case, which Matt Reeves says will be released at some point.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, this was again reveal for second ones. I heard that this was a casting rumor to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know about it. The laugh isn't really there, but from what Matt Reeves says, this does seem like an interesting take to go on.
So yeah, this is so the actor playing the Joker here is Barry Keoghan. If you know him from anything, it's probably from Eternals, where he played Druig, who is the guy you think is going to be evil but turns out not to be. But he's been working for quite a few years in sort of smaller indie films. His big break was The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is kind of defined his persona in film, where he plays a creepy kid who kind of supernaturally is inflicting horror upon Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman. Um, which is, if any movie got him this role, I think it would be that one. Barry Keoghan is very good at playing the creepy weirdo, which makes me interested to see what he would do with the role of the Joker. But yeah, we don't see enough here to really make much of a judgment of what his Joker would be like.
Yeah, and we're not even sure if he's gonna be like a really main role.
Yeah,
He
I
might
kind of
just
hope.
be like a more of a background one.
Yeah, I kind of hope if he is in the sequels that they maybe have like a scene or two of him in the next one and save him for the third one, because the Joker is one of the most seen Batman villains on screen, to
He's
the
most
extent where
beloved as well. Yeah.
he has his own movie. And yeah, in the past like 4 years, we've had two different, or this is the third live action interpretation of the character.
In just like 3 years.
Yeah. So I would love to see someone who hasn't gotten much of the spotlight recently.
Give us Clayface.
Yeah, or even not. You could even do like a Poison Ivy or Mr. Freeze. I
Yeah,
think. I
but
think.
Clayface never had a live action
Yeah.
interpretation. I want to see Clayface.
Yeah. So someone more interesting than the Joker again. Which is not to say that the Joker again would be uninteresting, and I think Matt Reeves could find an interesting direction to take it.
Calendar Man.
Yeah. Although the Batman is already kind of a long Halloween type.
Polka Dot Man.
Polka
Kite Man.
Polka Dot Man got a really good reinvention in the Suicide Squad, so that might be Kite Man. You could do something with.
Condiment King.
Yes, although I would save him as a character for James Gunn to do something with.
No. But yes, but no.
Yeah, like because you have Mr. Freeze, um, who has such an iconic, interesting motivation that I think Matt Reeves could do a lot with that character. Um, or you have Poison Ivy. I think I've already brought up.
We can have Hugo Strange, maybe.
Hugo Strange. I feel like they were setting up Hugo Strange in this. It's revealed that Martha Wayne is a member of the Arkham family. So I think, and that's actually honestly, a lot of the most popular Batman comics have now been sort of not adapted directly into live action movies, but kind of elements taken from them into live action movies. One of the few that hasn't had much ripped from it is the Neil Gaiman comic about Arkham Asylum. And I'm going to look at the exact title because it is not Arkham Asylum, but it is Batman. Oh, it is Batman Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth. It has a very unique art style, and it's sort of about the history of Arkham Asylum as Batman is moving through it and like interacting. It's like a night where Arkham Asylum has like the power has gone out and everyone has escaped and is roaming the asylum freely. And so Batman is moving through the asylum and
I
interacting with his various
I
villains.
could likely see a rehash of Two-Face.
Yeah. And it's like all of the rogues gallery makes an appearance here, but then it's also going into um Hugo Strange, or I don't know if it's exactly Hugo Strange, I believe it is, but sort of the history of the asylum, and it's a really interesting comic and not one that has been adapted yet.
Mm.
So I would be curious to see, what they could do with that kind of story.
Firefly.
Yeah,
Mad Hatter.
Mad Hatter might be too Alice in Wonderland. I don't know.
Mm.
I feel
Depends.
like a lot of these characters would be good, like secondary villains,
Yeah.
kind of like the Penguin in this one. It's kind of how they tend to be used in the comics as well.
But we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm intrigued to see other portrayals of characters. Hopefully, characters that we've not seen a whole lot of.
yeah,
It's good to see another Penguin. It's been a long time. Besides
yeah.
Gotham, of
A
course.
very different interpretation. Both Penguin and Riddler haven't been in a film.
Riddler, yes. Thank goodness for Riddler.
Yeah.
He needed some stuff. But yeah. Anything else we want to talk about?
I mean, it's such a long movie and there's so much to discuss, but I mean, a lot of it is just like watching the movie for yourself and discovering it, or rewatching it and discovering even more. This is one that I think, having seen it twice, really benefits from a second viewing because you see more things. And actually, this was something I wanted to bring up but forgot to earlier. The score, there are sort of four different important musical themes. We talked about the Riddler one. There's obviously the iconic Batman theme, which is, it's simple, but it
It's
works so
like
well because
four
it's just in
notes
your,
played over and over again, but it
yeah,
gets ramped up in volume
yeah. And
the
then
more it goes.
you have the Catwoman theme, which is sort of a noirish, very string heavy. Um, and then the final one is the Bruce Wayne theme, which is actually, if you look up the Batman theme on YouTube, that's the whole middle section of the Batman theme.
Mm-hmm.
It's Bruce Wayne theme, which is this very like melancholy, almost quiet, more meditative thing. And one of the interesting things about it is there's a very clear separation where the Batman theme plays when Batman is involved, the Bruce Wayne theme plays when Bruce Wayne is involved. The one time where I noticed it crossing over is that last scene of Batman leading these survivors out of the wreckage of this stadium with his flare, and it plays the Bruce Wayne theme. And I thought it was interesting that it indicates a change in the character where he's like, okay, maybe I don't need to be vengeance. I don't need to be this big, dark, brooding thing. I can be a symbol of hope.
Yeah. Composed by Michael Giacchino.
Yeah. Who? Yeah, he works a lot, so I think
He
some
works
of
a
his,
lot. He's the go-to.
yeah,
Not my favorite soundtrack, but he has some good themes in
yeah.
this.
And this is a very simple soundtrack. Like,
It
it's
is.
based on two, and not simple in a bad way, simple in a way that it's easy to understand what what it,
Yeah.
what it's signifying
The,
thematically.
the the main soundtracks is pretty much these four themes over and over again.
And different riffs on them. There's like
Yeah.
Batman when he's investigating the first crime scene, it's like it's the same four notes repeated over and over again, but it's done with le- not quite as loud with different instruments and kind of fits the,
Detective-esque.
yeah. I can't think of a word for it right now, but yeah, detective-esque.
And then you got the car chase, which is very loud and ceremonious.
Yeah. Which um such a simple way to make a soundtrack, but so effective for a film that is all about the characters. Like I would almost I'm curious to see how this movie does Oscar season wise, but I'm kind of hoping that at least the score gets some recognition. Um, Obviously, we're a long ways out from that. We're still in Oscar season for the movies of 2021,
Yes.
but
So, long ways.
yep, this I think has the potential of being. Usually, the Oscars like to do at least one big blockbuster movie that gets nominated for a bunch of stuff, and I think this one could be the blockbuster of 2022.
Yeah. This or Doctor Strange, but that's another thing.
Uh, I don't know that Doctor Strange is going to be quite sophisticated in the same way that this is.
No, but it might make just as much money.
Yeah, it might make.
But yeah, nice movie. I can't
Yeah,
wait to see it again whenever I see it again. But
yeah.
yeah,
This tips the scales for me. Where in the past I've been more of a Marvel movie fan, just because they have a much more consistent output. But I was looking at my list of DC movies and my ranked list of DC movies, and I realized, okay, I'm at the point where I like more of the DC movies than I dislike. And I really like more of the DC movies more than I really like the Marvel movies. Um, so yeah, slowly I'm becoming a DC film fan. Um, I think this is at the point where of the 13 movies I have on my list that they've released, starting with Man of Steel. 8 of them are movies I would say I like, and then the other 5 I am mixed on or dislike. Which is it's weird because most of those movies are pre 2017. So to see such a big shift in public perception and in my own perception of DC. And it's great because I mean Marvel is experimenting a little bit more with things, but DC has really been giving creators the space to make what they can.
and we'll see like how this changes when the Discovery merger
Yeah,
happens, or by this point it has happened
yeah,
for you listeners. So a lot of changes could be made. Flash has been pushed back a whole year,
yeah.
surprisingly. So yeah,
Flash and Aquaman
Aquaman.
have both been pushed back.
Everything's been pushed back. Those two have been pushed to next year, which
Shazam has been pushed forward, I believe.
yeah,
Months.
which supposedly the Flash changes things because like
Okay.
elements of the Flash plot was relevant to those other films. So
Okay.
we'll see
Uh,
how
which
this mess.
I'm yeah, I'm curious to see. I like my DC movies segregated from each other. I think some of the team up movies are on the weaker side.
But like just like standalone
Yeah.
stuff, I really appreciate.
Yeah. Where creators are allowed to sort of bring in their own tone and their own ideas, which is a majority of the DC films. I think the least of those, or the ones which were most sort of hampered by studio control, are the 2017 Justice League and the original Suicide Squad. Were both very publicly studio meddled. But since then there hasn't they've been pretty good about allowing creative control to the creators of the films. And I think the results have been overall very good.
Sometimes mixed, but
Yeah. Which I think I'm more positive on some of these movies than you are.
definitely,
I think
definitely.
especially like Birds of Prey.
Yeah,
I follow
like
the
I consider myself more of a DC fan
yeah
because I love most things DC, but like a lot of the stuff you like about DC, I dislike. So
yeah. Although
you,
we both like the Batman, so
we do.
I
We
think
have something in common.
I I, I think it has been one of those movies that's been uniting various sides of fandom.
Some
Because
degree.
we've had yeah, obviously there are people who dislike it,
We're
and I
also
think
just petty
yeah,
about, haha, Marvel sucks, DC
yeah,
for the win.
yeah. But it is one of those things where because we've had a lot of sort of controversial movies that have divided people, like The Rise of Skywalker or The Last Jedi, or you have um, even some of the more recent Marvel movies. Eternals kind of divided people. You have the Matrix reboot, the Ghostbusters reboot. So it feels kind of like whatever fandom you are involved in, everyone is constantly at everyone's throats.
Star Trek.
Yeah. So it is nice to have this like brief moment where a lot of people are in agreement that the Batman is great. Um yeah, it's a little bit of a respite from the
Recent just
craziness.
negativity over the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. It's an interesting movie. I'm curious to see what any sequels do, and then also how reception changes over time.
Yeah.
Because you have had movies that are well received early on and maybe don't age well. Although I expect this one will age pretty well. It
Yeah.
has a classic style to it.
Yeah,
I do.
it's mostly timeless besides, the more modern relevancy, but those are done for creative effect.
Yeah. The 3 hour runtime is I think the biggest obstacle to it, and that it is so dark. Like there are people who I know who I just can't recommend this movie to because I know they don't want to spend 3 hours being sad and tense.
Right.
And it ends hopefully, but it takes a long while to get anywhere near that. There's almost no levity. Um, it's a dour movie. It's a
But it
very good.
works
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So, yeah, any other final thoughts we have for this one?
Um, do we want to do a Batman ranking, or should we save that for another time?
Oh, we can save that for another time.
Okay.
Because we can also include animated stuff.
Yeah. So whereabouts does this fall in your Batman love?
So in terms of like live action Batman,
Yeah.
I think I would put this second under the
Okay.
Dark Knight. Dark Knight, I think it's still above for me because I think I can rewatch that one the most still. Because it
Yeah.
is more of like a blockbuster action. That's Batman, where this one is more in the mood for story and character psychological stuff.
Yeah. You
Which,
kind of need to be in the right mind space be to watch a 3 hour dark serial killer movie.
yeah,
The Dark Knight is a dark movie, but it, it it's more fun.
yeah,
Which is, flashback 10 years, and that's not what people would have been saying about The Dark Knight. That's what they might have been saying about previous Batman films. There's kind of been this evolution of the character where each iteration is a little bit darker than the last.
yeah. So who knows? Maybe you might see this listing one day
Yeah.
in 5 years when we finally get it
Yep.
put together. But yeah,
Yeah. For the record, I have it also my number two Batman movie, though I have it behind Batman Returns.
yeah, I saw that you put a little bit of praise on that one, which we'll discuss that when we finally get to that point. But yeah, if that's all we have,
Yeah, I believe so. We've been recording for half the runtime of this movie, so
Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.